Welcome to the Dark Zone, an adventure racing podcast.
His eco-challenge mentality coming through, where you reach a point where you don't care anymore. You just push your bike, and you don't care if you hit rocks. You don't care if it's whacking you on the shins. You don't care about the thorns. Stop caring. And I was quite amused by that.
Well, for me, the action is the juice. I'm in.
I need you, brother. Please, Sensei, please.
Courage, Bob. Courage.
That's it.
Courage.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Hey, thank you, Sensei. Thank you, Sensei. Thank you.
Say the word, Chef.
Whatever.
8 kids, 4 teams, 1 shot at a junior world championship. The USARA youth national teams are heading to Canada to represent the United States at the Junior Adventure Racing World Championships. And they need our help, the community's help getting there. These are young athletes doing what we did when we started, balancing school and training, learning to navigate, learning to suffer a little, learning what a real team actually means. And now they get to do it on an international stage against the best junior racers in the world. That's right, folks. We are sending our best to Canada, and we need your help because the costs are real. Registration, food, travel, accommodations. For young athletes and their families, those costs add up fast. The adventure racing community helped to build these racers. We built these kids, and we want to help them get to the start line. The link to support them is in the show notes. Whatever you could do makes a difference. Help to send our racers to Canada, and best of luck to everybody. The Adventure Racing Kids Summer Camp runs out of the Macedon Resort in Virginia this coming summer, 2026. Ages 9 to 16 years old, 1 week. Mountain biking, hiking, whitewater rafting on the Shenandoah, team challenges, campfires, and actual adventure racing concepts baked into each and every day. This is not a babysitting week with a ropes course. Nope. Grit Adventures. We know Grit. They do a great job. They run this program with intention, building resilience, teaching kids how to suffer a little bit and come out on the other side, and giving them teammates they'll remember. Hand a child a compass, let them figure it out, watch what happens. That's the whole idea for a whole week. Water park access, all meals included, tent camping on the property. The link is in the show notes, and if your child is ready, the Adventure Racing Kids Summer Camp would love to have them. Dark Zone listeners could use code DARKZONE when they register for a $100 discount. Welcome back to the Dark Zone, episode 156. This is your host, Brian Gatens. If you know adventure racing, you know today's guest, Adam Rose, a huge guy on YouTube, AR on AR. You'll find the link in the show notes. Race commentator, loves the sport, always a good chat. And he tells us all about his race in Bimbache last year in Morocco. A tough race. He will talk all about how rough it was, how challenging it was. Sick teammates, body bags, sleep deprivation, big canyons, suffering, but it was an adventure, exactly what we're talking about here in this sport. And Adam does a great job of breaking it all down. So thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. Sit back and relax and enjoy this episode of The Dark Zone. And as we always say, if you keep racing, we will keep talking. Adam Rose is on to talk about his adventures in Morocco. Those of you who know Adam and know Adam well, and AR is a great YouTube clip. I will put a link to the show notes on there. Adam is never at fault for a good story and good analysis. And we wanted to get with him and chat all about Morocco, Bimbache. Am I saying it correctly? First things first. Is that how we say it?
Bimbache.
Bimbache, the CH that shuts out. Bimbache, recent race in Morocco. Dark Zone listeners will remember that we had a flash podcast not too long ago with Team Bones. Did a great job recounting their race. And Adam is here to give his thoughts on the race and how it fits into the adventure racing pantheon and his own team experiences. And Adam is never a poor guest for the Dark Zone, so we're delighted to have him here. Adam, good to see you, Adam. So first things first, how's your recovery going?
There were a few interesting things because that was a brutal race. By the way, I haven't listened to Bones' interview, and I deliberately did not listen to it before speaking, having our conversation here, because I didn't want to be influenced by, their perceptions. But my recovery, first thing is, I expected after such a brutal race to have quite a, the delayed onset muscle soreness, DOM stuff, and nothing. So I was like, well, that's cool. That's a sign that I actually trained well enough, although I hadn't thought I did. But so far, and obviously it's not going to happen now, it's now a week after the event, nothing. And in terms of tiredness, I haven't yet found out, because we all know, deep fatigue after an expedition race, and you only really know it when you go out and train. So I have avoided establishing how much fatigue I have by refusing to train so far. It says I'm detraining, which is alarming.
Right.
But
yeah, Tyson Garmin says that, right? I'm going to throw my watch in the river when it tells me I'm detraining. Shut up, Garmin. So for the listeners, what was your team name and who were your teammates?
It was Beacon AR, Beacon Adventure Racing, number 34. And my 3 teammates, 2 of them I raced with in South Africa 2 years ago. So we had done Expedition Africa, the world champs there. That was Helen Chapman and Kane McGee. And then the 4th person was Rob Smart, who I hadn't raced with before. I had planned to race with him in Raiden, France before COVID canceled that edition. And he's got plenty of experience. So I knew him coming in, he knew what he was doing. He wouldn't need any help or anything. And that was a good decision. Yeah, it was a good team.
Right. It sounds like with the 4 of you have a pretty deep bench of adventure racing experience. You raced together, you know each other. So you were able to cut through a lot of that getting to know you stuff right away, and you can get down to business on the race course.
Yeah. I mean, Kane and Robert raced together at Iterra Lights that we organized last year. Helen is a beast no matter what the thing is. She's always at the front. She's always winning the local race series and things like that. I mean, it was easy, the 4 of us, pre-race and also during race, there wasn't anything where somebody was out of their depth or anything. It was just, for all of us, you could say it was out of our depth. Because
you're all the same. You're all out of your depth, but it was like one person more than another. Before we get to the race, how was your transfer to the race site? How'd you do with the flights, with your gear? Did your bikes make it? Did all your gear make it there?
Yeah, completely uneventful. We all kind of went through Heathrow one way or the other. And Helen arrived just before, then the other 2 arrived the day before, and then I arrived on the Saturday before the registration and everything kicked off. Yeah, there was no issues whatsoever. It was good, easy sailing there and back. And there was.
Did you go direct? Did you have to connect, or did you go direct?
Oh, I had fun. They all went direct from Heathrow. I had to fly from Manchester down to Heathrow on Friday evening, and then transfer myself across to Gatwick, which isn't that far, but hey, it's like an hour and a half by train or whatever. And then sit in Gatwick Airport or lie on the floor or whatever until 6:30 in the morning, and then fly out from there. It's not the end of the world, but it was, it was what it is. At least on the way back there was no Gatwick. It was just a hop and a hop.
Yeah, it's a bit of a challenge. I bring up the question about the transfers is because we talked about this with the Bones podcast that came up. How when you travel to a race, and it's a big race and it's a big travel day, very often our sleep is all screwed up, and the first day of the race is really the second day, and you don't sleep well and all that, and so having to do a lie in an airport's a little challenging, and getting there. But it sounds like it's just you're an adventure racer, right? You just showed up there and you're good to go. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't appreciate sleeping on the floor of the terminal. But it's normal.
How'd you find all the pre-race stuff? How'd you find the gear organizing and the testing and the parades and all that? How'd that go?
Yeah, I mean, most of your viewers probably are unaware of the history of the Bimbache, but I was at the previous edition in 2013 in Spain, outside just north of Barcelona in Girona, up into the Pyrenees. And that was a hectic experience. It was my first RWS race anyway, but it was also an introduction to Antonio de la Rosa, race director. And for people who haven't met him, he's another level of dynamic energy. And when I first met him at that previous edition, he was so full of energy, and I'm not, he doesn't know this, but I thought he was on coke because he was bouncing off the walls. And I was like, whoa, what kind of person is this, And it turned out...
he's the race director.
Yeah, I know. But it's at that particular event, things had gone horribly wrong in behind the scenes. And when we met him at the previous race, on the Saturday, he was rescuing his race from the race director himself. So Antonio was like producing things. Their race director had disappeared with all the money from the race, having a panic attack in a forest. And not knew where he was. So Antonio rescued the race, had to modify it on the fly, which was brilliant, as in he managed to keep the race alive and gave a very emotional speech at the race briefing, which is when I then got to see inside his head and go, oh, okay, this guy's legit, as in he's not on coke. He's just so full of fire and energy. And then the thing was, it was such a short preamble to the race. The registration and everything was literally like, I think the Saturday afternoon, and we started the racing the very next morning.
Gotcha.
Like slam bam. And then the race itself was brutal. And the finish, we finished on the Saturday. We had a meal on Saturday evening and we all flew out on Sunday. And now this race, I knew coming in, therefore, that, okay, Antonio de la Rosa is going to make a tough race. No matter what, there wasn't any surprise for me. I just knew that this is what was likely to happen.
And that was the conventional wisdom. Anybody who was going talked about how they knew they were going to get the full experience with Antonio as the RD. And plus being in Morocco, right? They knew that was coming.
Yeah. And also this race had such a short duration, not the race itself. 5 days is 5 days. But, I got there on the Saturday and then Sunday's registration, briefing, handing in all your kits, and Monday's go. I mean, it was like, wow. Yeah. And then the finish was likewise, and the finish was ludicrous. The finish time was 2 p.m. in the afternoon, which we just exceeded by 10 minutes, but that's fine, whatever.
And that was the Saturday?
Yeah, the Saturday.
Monday start, Saturday finish.
Correct, 120 hours. And so we'd started at 2 and we finished at 2 kind of thing. And we at the finishing line, it's such a rush. There's all these tourists around, this incredible waterfall spectacle and everything. But we then had to go back to our respective apartments, wherever they were, for all the different teams, get all our kit organized, get all the stuff dried from what we've just done, all the canyon and the water and everything, and get it prepped and delivered before 7 p.m. that evening. All the bikes had to be in the boxes and delivered and on
Saturday.
We take Marrakesh. And then the banquet started at 7 p.m. as well.
Gotcha.
The teams were just like, wow, drawn quite tightly. And then the next morning we left at 5 a.m. or we had to be up at 5 a.m. to catch the bus down to the airport.
Right.
Now, you could argue the race needn't have been so high pressure at the end if we had just been a little bit faster.
Well, if you finish Thursday.
No, 400 team.
They funny. I was like, dude,
it's my fault. Our fault. 400 team finished 35 hours ahead of us. So we really don't have any excuse. I'm just whinging.
Meanwhile, because it's the other way around, the team that finishes Thursday, if they're waiting, they're like, wait a minute, what are we waiting all these days for? Like, we got to get going here. So he was. So how did you find the race itself?
Okay. Yeah. My summary that I've made,
and if you can, walk us through the stages if you can, if your memory is good enough.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. I took so many photos. My memory's perfect then. It opened with a trek, and the trek was roughly 45K, so roughly marathon distance. And it was starting out from this historic Ait Ben Haddou, UNESCO site, heritage site, very beautiful, very interesting, featured in all these movies like Indiana Jones and Star Wars and Troy and Gladiator. It featured in Gladiator part of it. It's a very, very interesting place to start. Very Moroccan Casbah kind of feel to it with the souk.
Got that vibe. I feel like you said, you feel like you're on a movie set. Everyone would recognize it. Yep.
It was literally a movie set for so many different movies. And that trek, desert trek, dry trek, arid, was quite hard, not for distance or anything, but because a lot of the time you are on plains, like open plains, covered in lots of small pebbles. So it's not like you're just trekking on a path. There's no path. You're trekking on uneven, quite hard surface, like walking on golf balls. And for some people, that hit their feet quite badly. So they were debilitated, foot-wise, right on stage one, even though they weren't suffering from sand or something like that. That was followed by a biking leg, which was the single most brutal mountain biking I've ever done in 24 hours in my life.
In your life. That's a quick statement there, Ad. Hold on, wait, back up a little bit. So the opening trek, the 45K was hard, golf ball size walking. Yeah. But you're saying now, with your depth of experience, that your hardest mountain bike was the mountain bike at Bimbache.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it was, okay, why? Well, At the end of that bike stage, I could look back and see that bike stage was composed of 4 separate stages within it. Like it was quite clearly defined, not necessarily by intention, but certainly by experience. That's what it looked like. And I remember with my teammates going, wow, that feels like days ago. And it was only this morning, because that had been so intense. Just by the way, at the end of stage 1, Helen, the one teammate, she had suffered from food poisoning prior ever to get into Morocco. Some food poisoning, some sort of illness or thing. And she'd been trying to recover and hoped she had recovered. And so she did stage 1. And by the end of stage 1, she realized that she had nothing in the tank. She couldn't keep any food down. And she recognized, because she's got like a biomedical background, she was like, this is not just I'm feeling bad. This is I am not going to eat anything and I cannot eat anything. And therefore she pulled out at the end of stage 1 because she knew if she got into the next stage, it would be even harder and she would be in the middle of nowhere and it wouldn't be fair on the team to even try and get evacuated if necessary. Right. And how can you cope if you're not taking calories in? So straight from stage 2, we were unranked, and that affected the 3 of us in that we understood, okay, we unranked.
That's tough on her. I mean, I feel bad for her.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like, holy cow, all that distance, all that travel, all the promises to have your body turn against you. And by the way, there was Bones, not to get ahead of the conversation, Bones, same story, sick as a dog.
Oh, really?
Like Roy Malone, just as sick as it gets, having to recover and messy and stuff like that, and just the worst ever. So, and they battled through it. But to Helen's point, like sometimes the body just falls apart on it. Yeah,
I said to Helen at that TA, look, what if we just wait? Forget the timing, what if we just wait? And she was
25
like,
hours and stay there for a day, let her get better in just short course.
Yeah, and she said, thank you so much, but I know that this is not something you just recover from because it's pre-Morocco. It's like a month long. And so she took the wise decision. It's kind of weird also, and for no reason that I know of. I mean, we were in the dark by the time we finished that first stage. I was speaking to the officials, getting my passport stamped or whatever, or verified. And I suddenly felt nauseous. And I was like trying to hurry them up because I just knew I was going to spew. And I don't know why. And so I managed to get away from them, take the passport and then go off to the side of the road and just dry retch and then lie down on my back in the dirt and just feel, wow, what the heck is this? 10 minutes later, I'm fine. Right. And it never reemerged. I don't know what it was. And was it the strain of what we had just done? Was it that we were pushing too hard? I don't know. And then I found out that Kane, my other teammate, had also been feeling sick. So it wasn't food poisoning because that would have expressed itself far more violently. It was just like, oh, this is weird. The heat, the strain, it's a hard course, maybe.
Yeah, and also your body is managing a million different emotions and feelings and like there's stuff keep it all together.
That bike stage, just for those who weren't there, you started off leaving the TA and then going back through the thickets and the kind of like garden plots on the floor of this valley. I mean, it's in a town kind of, but you had the option of backtracking a little bit further and crossing via bridge on your bike, fighting across the river by whatever means you could. And it wasn't a deep river or anything. It's a riverbed. And we chose the latter because it was more direct. And it was gorse bushes, thick, spiky gorse bushes. You've had them in Scotland, I know that. And that was brutal. And we found a way through and other teams started following us all in the dark, right? So that was an experience just beating our way across to the other side of the river. Took us an hour or two out of. And then once we got there, we were told to follow a road that had a pretty straight road that went through a reservoir. So obviously the road was old, I suppose, and the reservoir is relatively new, separated by decades. But what they had told us was, here's a satellite map of the current level of the dam. Mm-hmm. When you try to follow that road, which is the most logical route to the next tier, next CP, that may or may not be covered with water. And so we head down this road in the middle of the night and we get to the lake edge and the road just goes in. And at this point, the French team ahead of us, French or Spanish, and they retreated and they went back the way they came to try to find a route around. We chose, I think, the more creative option, and I say that positively, that we immediately hugged the lake shore. And there's no path or anything, but it's dry desert scrub like you'd find outside Vegas or something. So we found a way, which was really fun. I mean, it was interesting and it was flattish and everything, to skirt closer to the lake shore, because if you went too wide, if you retreated and too wide, you were out of bounds on some out of bound roads. And I heard that the French team 400 that won the whole event actually went straight into the water to the point where Sandrine's nose or chin was just above the water.
Right.
I don't know they had to retreat, but that kind of thing. I know one of my other teams that I know well, the South African team, Truffle Hunters, they tried and they got to a point where their 6 foot whatever captain was just under the water. So skirting around was the wiser choice.
And the road, and just for context, this is day one still.
It is. And so day one. Yeah, we skirted the reservoir and it took hours, many hours to go, and get into thickets and bushes and, whatever. You eventually make your way around the whole lake. So that was kind of part 2. And then the next part of this leg was like wide open desert plains heading north towards the Atlas Mountains. And spectacular, like huge, wide open, beautiful. And I loved that. And we had a tailwind the whole way. So it was just blowing. We saw dust devils on each side. And it was just gorgeous, straight road for the most part. And then it got to a critical juncture where you could either follow what looked like a dead straight Jeep track, most direct route, or elect to not take that route and skirt around on a much wider, circuit around this desert plain on what were likely to be good roads, including tarmac. And Kane and Rob and I decided to do the straight route. And that was brutal. Brutal. Because it's desert in that you look at it and you can see this like dead straight track, like very faint Jeep track heading across. The reality is, as you follow that, you go over gentle rises and dips and you suddenly realize there's a huge ravine that's being concealed. And you've got to go down the ravine and up the other side. And then you crest that and you think you're good. And then there's another one and there's another one and there's another one. So looking at the tracker, most teams actually took this route, which I was surprised at. I thought we were fairly alone in our suffering. We hardly saw any other, tire tracks. But there were, I suppose, I don't know, in the States you would call it a gulch or whatever, but very deep eroded channels.
Right.
And you can't just ride down right up the other side, because when you ride down to the bottom, there is
it turns into, in fact, a stream. Whenever it does rain there, not rains a whole lot, it turns into a spot where just the ground is so dry, it just pulled all the ground away. And you basically have this huge hole.
You literally have to hop across half a meter to up to a meter wide at the very bottom. So, this was midday. It was boiling hot. It was rocky. It was so much hike bike, just getting in and out of these things, And eventually we lost the plot and said, this is garbage. And we just struck off across the terrain, like just aiming for a bearing, and eventually connected up to a road. And was like, oh, wow, we're making progress, and made it to further down the course and met other teams who were also flaked out in a little Berber.
So there's been a good lesson there, right? Well, so your logic on the Jeep track with the fact that it felt like the more direct route, right? That's what it felt like to you. And therefore, straight is good, right? We want to get from A to B as soon as we can. Yeah. In retrospect, taking a more circuitous route would have served the team better. But that's what you learned after you set off on it.
Absolutely. And we regretted it. And taking our route, and a lot of our fellow teams took that wider path, and they benefited from that. They didn't suffer as much, and they were breezing along on tarmac a lot of the time. Just not to go too much on about this bike trek, but then the next section, once we entered into the mountains, was following a riverbed. Again, hardly tracked at all. Crossing the stream again and again. Again, no big deal. Just it was different terrain. And then you got into deeper hills and you started traversing the side of a gorge is a dramatic word. It's not quite a gorge, but steep sided and everything. And you're traversing along the side. And we did that into the dusk. And then we hit an evil climb. And when you hit a climb at night, you can't tell how high it is. You can't tell how much further you got to go. And that was the killer. So this climb, it went up, I don't know, I haven't really looked at the contours, but it was insane. And we went on, I don't know, 5 hours, 7 hours, I don't know.
Yeah, what other teams too, that the level of climbing was just breathtaking on that first bike. Like it was just, they couldn't get over how they was going up and up and up.
And by the time we got to the TA, the TA fortunately was a little bit on the downhill side, like we'd gone over that summit, but it was, I don't know, summit was 2,000 plus meters, 2,500 meters, whatever that is in feet. But by the end of that, when we got into the TA, which was a busy TA with, all these people getting ready for the next trek leg, it was buzzing. We were dead tired, and the organizers had set up quite nicely. They'd set up about 5 or 6 small tents, and any team could say, oh, we want that tent, and go sit in their tent and sleep. So they'd done it for us, and that was quite nice. And they had hot food, which was only one of 2 places that had any hot food or hot water.
Right.
But that had us there. So we've been through 2 nights. Is it 2 nights? And now we're on to go. At dawn, we woke up for that 3rd stage, or early dawn.
Was that your first sleep? You had the hot food, which is great. Did you sleep in the TA, or did you?
Yeah, we slept in one of those tents for, I think, 2 hours. And prior to that, in that long build-up, I had slept, I think, 15 minutes on the cafe floor somewhere.
Okay.
I think that was pretty much it. Otherwise, we were just pushed and pushed. And a lesson learned for this entire race was the need to strategize our sleep more concretely than we actually did in the race, because that came back to bite us.
In other podcasts, we've talked about this. This was on a couple episodes about other races too. And La Ruta Madre came up, and Bimbache came up. The fact that a lot of teams are beginning to sleep more during races, that they're committing to 3 hours a night. And it seems to be serving them well, right? I don't quite know. I mean, I have to get 400 on. They chat with them about their strategy. I mean, they're just always the pointy end of the spear. They're good to talk to. But to your point, like if team, you just disintegrate later in the race. Like if you don't get good sleep, it's all of a sudden everything is upside down.
Yeah, I mean, something early on in that whole 4-stage bike leg, after we finished that reservoir part, we came across a petrol station where loads of teams are just like flaked out and drinking Coke and recuperating in the shade, from that reservoir bit. And I noticed, and it's not a new thing, but I noticed a fair number of European teams, so whether they're Spanish or French or whatever they were resting properly. So they might have been chatting and drinking Coke or whatever, but they had also taken off their shoes, which we didn't bother doing. They were lying down and sleeping. And that's less than 24 hours into the race.
Gotcha. So they were starting to bank sleep right away.
Yeah. And we had a strategy of, okay, let's push you the first 24 hours as most teams would, and then let's start banking 2 hours a night. Now, that was our goal before the race. During the race, we had a terrible race. I kid you not. We had a terrible race, but as I said on Facebook, we had a wonderful adventure. So there is that to it. I mean, but in terms of many things on this race,
so what was terrible about it? Did you just make poor decisions about navigation and sleep? It's always adventuring, right? No matter what happens, it's going to be an adventure.
Indeed.
But what did you, when you look back on it, what should you have done better to make it less terrible?
Well, and I'm not pointing fingers at the organizers. It's just life. But the fact that had terrible weather in March, that had messed up what they anticipated to be the course. And then on the Saturday, I think it was Saturday before the race started. So this is one day before registration, or even at registration. I'm trying to remember that. They changed the course again and or confirmed some changes. So we had spent, like many teams would have, we had spent hours and hours getting all our gearboxes organized with the right food in the right place, so that when we got it on the course, as you know, right? So looking at the schematic and planning accordingly. And then in the early evening, they turn around, and we have to hand in our boxes that day. It must have been the Sunday. They said, we're changing it. So these boxes are no longer available at this point. They're not going to be available at this point. So you've spent all this time and energy getting things just ship shape, and then suddenly you've got to rejig them because you can no longer meet this and you can no longer meet that. So for example, at the end of stage 1, we got our bike box, and we were going to get gearbox A as well. But because of these last minute changes, I hadn't used my brain, and I got to that first transition, and I had no food because that was 120 kilometers away.
Right.
Now I only can meet us at the next transition. And fortunately, Helen was able to say, look, I'm not competing, so you just take all my food. So there were things like that, where there were curveballs from just circumstance. There were things where we made such newbie mistakes, such unwise decisions, and lived through them.
Like what? Like bad clothing choices, gear, having duplicate kit that you didn't have to bring along.
Yeah, just things like that, or like a newbie nav era. So going back to what you said, what happened, stage-wise. We had just finished this big bike leg and we started the trek, and the trek was the queen stage of the race. Certainly before they modified the course, it was a 75 kilometer, I think 4,000 meter gain. So that's what's at 12,000 feet.
12,000 feet, yep. 3 times 4.
And it featured a big canyon section. You would have had to carry your wetsuit and your crampons and your climbing gear and the food and whatever for 75 kilometers in high mountains. The highest peak that we were supposed to summit was 4,000 meters. So they modified this, chopped the 75 kilometers down to 45. So suddenly we saved 30 kilometers. Chopped the canyoning stage. So we suddenly no longer had to take our wetsuits on there or our climbing gear on there. We still had to take our crampons. I'm really glad we did that leg, and we did the whole leg. We were the last team to do that leg. Quite a few teams did the first CP, realized the scale of these mountains and decided, let's just go back to TA and continue on the following bike leg. So we did the full thing, and it was incredibly beautiful, majestic. We saw really deserted areas. Kane said to me last night, he found it even more deserted than what we saw in Expedition Africa 2 years ago. And he was quite surprised at that, to feel that remoteness. And that's partly the altitude, I mean, it was really high mountains. But in that leg, we came up, we did this really epic part where we had to use crampons, and we all ice-bound and incredible. It was good to actually use kit, instead of just carry it, actually use it, because you know what it's like, right? Sometimes you don't actually get to use it. And Antonio had warned us before. He said, don't anybody bring Catula spikes or running spikes. You have to bring proper 10-point crampons. And we all and ahhed, because that's weight. But in retrospect, when we got to that point and the wind was howling, I mean, it was, 60 kilometers an hour, maybe more. You could barely hear anybody speak. And we at this pass, at this saddle, and, there's this little tent that this volunteer's been sitting at for 3 days. And he's like, he has to lean over to me and yell in my ear, put on crampons. And I'm just like, well, okay. And that's when it was really,
to all the volunteers out there, thank you very much.
Yeah, because prior to that, before we got there, we'd seen snow patches in the distance and we didn't know that it was a big deal. We thought, there's a little bit of snow, so what? We get up to the top there, it's like, oh, flipping heck, this is howling, it's freezing. I think it was 3,600 meters, that highest point that we were at, and the wind just bucketing through this pass. And then we descended down to this incredible valley floor, and we got to a refuge where we met this whole 7 French guys who were exploring the mountains, one of which, the most charismatic of which, was an ex-professional rally driver or the co-driver, and he knew the forests that I currently train at. He's like, oh, North Wales, and he was rattling off the names of all these forests that he had rally driven.
All the way to Morocco to make friends.
Yeah, I know, it's great. And we should have rested there at that refuge. We should have spent 2 hours and done a proper job, but in typical kind of stubborn fashion, no, keep on moving. It's dusk. Let's take advantage of the daylight, and hit the next CP, no problem. We were quite confident. We were on track. We're moving well, and then the wheels fell off, and that wheels fell off translated into all the other teams that did this full trek, presumably just followed the trail, navigated day or night, whatever, and continued. We took a wrong turning, and ended up being like headless chickens, surrounded by an incredible landscape, because we had previously followed kind of like, fairly flat, monotonous, easily discernible ridges and lines. And then suddenly at dusk, and we take this wrong turn, we end up with huge rock spires and caves and precipitous drops of cliffs. And it was just like mind-boggling. Like, what the hell? How did we wander into this? It feels like an alien landscape. And we were taking bearings and trying to find where we were, and we didn't want to fall down a huge canyon, which we knew was somewhere to our south that we were supposed to have been down, and gorged down. And we ended up saying, okay, let's pull out the body at 3,250 meters, so it's still high. It's freezing. The wind is howling, and we sat in that body for 8 hours waiting for the dawn.
And that was the fall. When you say bath, you mean like the fall of the bag over the head? Like you like the parachute and you all sit inside of it on top of each other?
Correct. So it's a 4-man emergency shelter.
I'd rather freeze to death, with all due respect. They tried to put me in one of those in Scotland. It didn't happen.
Well, it turned out to be effective against the elements, but we stupidly were, if we had used our brains, we would have said, look, if we just take a break for 2 hours and then come out of that and hit a bearing of southwest, we're guaranteed to hit the path no matter what. Instead, we wait for dawn, suffered because we try to lie down and sleep and you can't because it's not designed for that. It's too small. And the wind is buffeting and you're snoring and you're awake and you're watching your watch every 15 minutes and it was hell. And when we did wake up at dawn, we descend the path, I don't know, a couple of 100 meters away. It's like, it's right there. It's right there. What the hell? Like, what are we making stupid mistakes? Like,
always. And right. You stop and also you look up, it's like, oh, okay, you're back on. Yeah. We had that happen. We were in the Faroe Islands. Lost, tripping around, lost the trail. What are we going to do? We end up sleeping. We wake up 3 minutes as we wake up, we're right back on the trail.
Yeah. Like, hello, we've got the experience. What are we doing? And it was a lack of sleep. We weren't thinking clearly. We weren't naviging clearly. We weren't making wise decisions. But, yeah, I mean, we finished that trek. One plus was we actually got to see the end of the trek, which was spectacular in the high mountains, dropping down into the valley to the TA. We went past a Berber shepherd who was just burning a bush on the side of the hillside. So there was the man by the burning bush, which was kind of interesting there in North Africa. And he was doing that to heat up his hands while his young son was steering a donkey up this mountain path, because the donkeys are the only form of transport or load bearing up there at those high mountains. And yeah, I mean, when we hit that TA to go, because it was a loop, right? When we got back to where we were, it was, we were but somewhere between five, they said, when was the last team through here? And we had taken bets, how many bikes would be left? And when we got there, ours was the only set of bikes, and it felt bad. Huh? And then secondly, they told us, we've been waiting for you guys for about 5 or 6 hours.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh man.
It's like two really annoyed volunteers.
Yeah, they're exhausted. Great, eh? They were really tired. Yeah, and yeah, so we were the last team out of there onto the next bike leg. And yeah, the next bike leg, yeah, it was epic. Flipping heck, yo. That was a bad stage. This is Antonia's way of, I don't know. He didn't deliberately want to torture anybody, but the choice he made to shorten the Queen stage from 75 down to 40 meant part of what used to be trekking became biking, and it's never been designed for biking. It's designed for trekking.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I mean, Bones probably told you about that leg where you had to, we were told to carry our bikes potentially for 3 to 4 hours. And as a fairly fast team on that stage, we took 7 hours plus.
Was this like with the trail, like you were walking on this trail and like there was a very, very thin trail, big drop off to the side, right? And you had your bikes on you? Yeah.
Yeah.
They talked about that.
Yeah, I mean, that was nasty. And it was a long uphill. And there were local kids who were like, excitedly running alongside us. And one of the kids said to me, hey, can I push your bike? And I'm like, we're unranked, so it's not like we're doing anything illegal. We're already not going to, yeah. So I said to the kid, yeah, you can push it. And he pushed it for like, 20 meters or something to give them that feeling of like, hey, I'm with these races, And then he and 2 others decided to stick with us. And one was young. I mean, he was under 10, certainly. He was probably 8 years old. And the other ones were probably 10, 12 years old. And they just decided to continue with us. And Rob and Kane were like, no, don't touch our bikes. Don't touch our bikes. And then the harder and harder it got, the more we all capitulated. So these kids helped us push and push our bikes up this disgusting incline. And we ended up paying them in food. They didn't ask for food. They didn't ask for money. They didn't ask for anything. They were just excited and chirpy and natural and bouncy and mischief. It was beautiful. But when we hit the summit, because it was a summit that, went from this push stage down into descending into a canyon, we hit a storm, and that storm was very brief, but it was flipping wild. So much so, like we're crouching down, trying to, at the pass, which is 2,700 meters or whatever it was, trying to make a decision. And the wind was so strong. Rob was holding onto his bike with the handlebars, and the wind picked up his bike and swung it right around his head, like horizontally, like he was trying to do a tabletop. And in my case, it had actually pushed me up the hill at that point. I was riding my bike uphill without pedaling, because the wind was sufficient to get us up the hill without pedaling. But yeah, the next part down into the canyon was insane, because that was, it must have been about 4 to 5 hours of thou shalt not bring a bike here, thou shalt carry a bike here.
Right. I mean, that stage though. I mean, but here you are now. You're multiple days into the race. You're the last one to get your bike out of it. I mean, the race was just relentless.
Yeah, that's the thing. That is pretty much. I won't just say it's Antonio. I'm going to make a crass generalization. I have raced more races in Spain than any other country I've raced in. And Spanish races, in my humble experience, have a tendency not to hit you with something hard, then give you breathing room to recover, and then hit you again with something hard, like some sort of balance. They hit you with something hard and then do something even harder, and then do something even harder. And you remember the World Championships in 2021, just after COVID?
Yep.
And that opening stage as a trick was 120 kilometers. And that broke people. That broke their feet. It broke some people's spirit, I imagine. And
a lot of teams came apart there because if I had some early podcasts. That was in the early days of the Dark Zone, and I remember speaking to racers from that race, and they said that shattered teams. I mean, it was too much, too early, too soon.
Yeah, it was, and I've just found that with Spanish races, people through experience, I can just say they are hard. And is it the race directors just are hard people? I don't know. Is it that they just try and see how far they can push you? I don't know. But this race was the hardest for me.
Okay, so it sounds like it's going great so far. Unranked, lost your teammate, body bag for 8 hours, last person.
Okay, let me explain what happened on this day just quickly. Once we got through that canyon nonsense and terrible stuff, the hiker bike, then the riding became great. And you were on like big open gravel roads, hugging hillsides, climbing hills, dropping down the other side, whatever. It's beautiful. But the problem in our case was I started to suffer real problems from sleep deprivation.
Okay.
And I'm plenty experienced in it. I know what usually my sleep monsters was simply that shadows start to look like animals, that kind of thing where you're like, what is that I'm seeing? And your eyes play tricks on you. This was far worse because Kane and Rob were doing relatively well. And the understanding they had was that we had to get to the next TA by a certain time. So I wanted to rest, but based on what they understood, because I was half asleep anyway, based on what they understood, we had a deadline, we had a cutoff, and we needed to get there. So we couldn't afford for me to sleep as much as I needed.
Right.
Plus I'm the oldest, right? I'm the fogey. And so it got to a point we were going up like logging roads to another summit, like up to the next highest point in the race on bike, certainly, where I was falling asleep, whether pushing a bike or riding the bike on the flat or riding the bike downhill, where I wouldn't just fall asleep and then crash or fall asleep and then wake up. I would fall asleep in an instant while I'm moving and then have intense dream.
Yeah.
So it's not where you're awake and you're imagining a conversation with people, which often happens,
you're seeing things, you're hallucinating, you're forgetting about your teammates. Right.
Yeah. This was my body shutting down, forcing me to rest at completely unpredictable intervals where I would suddenly be in a very intense dream, talking or listening or arguing or something was going on. And that would last for X number of seconds. And then suddenly I'd be awake again. And when I woke up again, I would be like, what? Oh, I'm awake again. And when you're doing that and you're riding downhill, that's not good. And when you're riding
also the riding downhill is really rhythmic. The sound of the pedal, it's like paddling, right? The sound of the pedal going around, it lulls you to sleep.
Yeah. And where there's a drop many meters, that's not a good thing.
Yeah. That's actually called the big sleep, by the way. That's the big sleep.
Yeah. I was heading for the big sleep more than once, and it became quite frightening because I was alarmed because you'd be riding and I'd be trying to shake my head and bite my cheek and do whatever and yell or whatever just to try and keep myself awake. But these things would just hit me out of the blue and I'd be out. And it happened, I don't know, 20 times, 30 times. It was a lot. And we hit the CP29 at dawn. And dawn normally wakes you up, right? And it did to a degree, and it was incredible views. But then when we descended from this peak, it started coming back again. So I actually feared for my safety.
So in the context of the race, right? Think of the race as a full course. What percentage of the race were you through by that point, by CP29? Were you halfway through, 3/4, a quarter way through?
Yeah, in terms of the schematic, well, probably 70%.
Okay.
20%. What remains?
Had you gone through? Had you the wet canyoneering at this point? Am I mixing my races?
That's the final stage. That's the final stage.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then, okay, long story short, obviously I woke up eventually. Kane started suffering from this. He told me last night. I had no idea he did. And he said he had found it very frightening. But it was, again, a stern lesson. And listen, you can't afford to mess around sleep-wise when that kind of thing happened. I mean, obviously. And
right.
and Rob was Rob and Kane were navigating, so they were more awake anyway. But then Rob had a wipeout on a dead straight piece of tarmac, and I happened to be awake at that point. And he fell heavily on his shoulder, on his hand, and ended up, we found out afterwards, he fractured a bone in his hand and shortened a metatarsal, sheared. But the thing is, that was probably due to sleep. Just momentary slip. There was a cave towards the end of that second bike stage, which was the worst cave I've ever been in my life. Not because it was a bad cave, but because of the human detritus at the entrance. Not high. And there were lots of clothes, especially, I don't know, looked like young people's clothes at the entrance to this cave. Anyway, you went and got a CP and you came out of it. Yeah, long story short. And
was that the wet one? Was that when you were walking through the water?
In the cave. Cave, yeah. I mean, we were wondering whether we were going to get septic shock or something without all the cuts and all the pedal bumps and scrapes on our legs because it was just, the water was...
Yeah, crummy water, yeah.
Oh, man. And then we got into TA, and that would have been the last biggish stage, which was a road gain of 40 kilometers. You had to get... It was interesting. It was a nice strategy. They gave each of the road gain CPs a point, some higher points than others, and you were not allowed to get all of the checkpoints. You had to choose strategically from those checkpoints to get a subset.
Got it. Was it 20?
Value. Yeah, it was 20. And eventually it was originally 23 out of 27. Then they dropped it a bit. I think they dropped some of the CPs. But so we got into TA, beautiful, sunny, shining. Oh, here's the great story. As we were getting to the cave, which was shortly before the TA, we're riding along and we see the speaker come along and it's Helen. It's like, what? What are you doing here in the middle of nowhere?
I was here the entire time.
Yeah, they had taken her to the finish line, after they picked her up at TA1, and she, got to the end, and she decided, this isn't so interesting. So she set out after 2 days and took a 5-hour ride and looked at the tracker and met up with us just before the cave. Like, well, what are you doing here? And she joined us for the
unranked. Right. Unranked, you do whatever you want. Right?
Yeah. She joined us for the rest of the race and was a strong competitor for the remainder of the race.
Okay.
So when we got into the TA, we just said, look, we're not going to be able to do any of that road gain. That's fine. We'll sleep for a couple of hours, actually, for a change. And there were a lot of teams there making those kinds of decisions, like, okay, drop this, drop that. We met a lot of, Team Disability was there. Some of the other UK teams were there. We saw a lot of them. And then to cut all those stages short, this is followed by a fast mountain biking stage. It is a 50% gain and 100% descent, if you know what I mean. So double the amount of descent, and that was beautiful. Really, really, really beautiful, scenic. Down to a lake, which had a kayaking stage, 6 CPs. Some teams, unfortunately, had dropped the Queen hiking stage, which was stage 3, because they wanted to do the kayak.
Right.
Now, that's their business, whatever. You choose which CPs you want to go for. But that kayak stage was fairly boring because it was a lake and you just went out and back and you picked up some CPs and there was nothing to it, Whereas the Queen hiking stage 3, was flipping. You're never going to go there again.
Right. And you had one shot to see that. Right.
Yeah. So we're really glad with the decision that we made to pick that one up and not just pick up a single CP on that Queen stage. Yeah, so we picked up a few CPs on there, 3 CPs out of 6. Some teams dropped that kayak stage altogether when we were there. And we did it at dusk. And then there was one last bike followed by the final wet canyon trek. And that one last bike was nasty again, like everything had a kick in the tail. I remember speaking to Andrea Anderson from Disability, I think at that kayak, saying, how long are you guys going to budget for the next stage? And she says, I don't know. I don't know. We don't know with any of these stages, there is no way to predict how long you're going to take because none of the stages had been straightforward, none of them.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on route books are great. Don't get me wrong, right? And route books are used to feed nervous racers energy, right? That's what they're there for. And also too, good information, gear you got to carry, all of that. But time estimates are like,
you bring up a sore point here, right? And it'll be interesting what people think about this. It's, as you know, it's very common when you get a race schematic before the race. They've got the outline, as we know, for all the stages. This is how long the stage is,
right,
in distance. This is how much altitude or gain you're going to be doing, and how much time a team can expect to spend on it if it's a fast team.
Right.
And sometimes even what's the maximum amount of time if you're a slow team, right? So those time estimates are really, really important if it's a tricky race. And in this race, they did not give us time estimates. And that's a failure. And I'm not like, why didn't they do it? I'm just saying this race was harsh in many, many ways. So many people found it incredibly grueling, not just our team. And if we talk about that last stage, that canyon stage, most teams on paper would have looked at that as we did and gone, oh, it's 9 kilometers long. It's a final stage. We've got to do an abseil of a bridge. That's no big deal, 10 minutes. And then you've got 9 kilometers of trek. And at the very end, there's a little optional, well, not optional, but there's another little rope technical section. So you look at that, 9 kilometers, what is that? That's 2 hours. And then we got there to the start of that final stage, and they tell us, hurry. And we're like, what? We've got plenty of time. And they say, no, this will take you 6 to 7 hours. And we're like, what on earth? For 9 kilometers? Yeah, it's a canyon. You're not going to do it in 2 hours. And so our team was one of them. We had all these teams like rushing around trying to get all their kit. And the problem I'm talking about here about not knowing the time, if we had known the time.
Because you can't just go on distance.
No. If we'd known the time, we would have budgeted accordingly. So many teams were doing those last few stages fairly casually because they're like, look, it's this. It's not going to take long. The reality is you get to that stage and suddenly, what if you didn't have the food?
Right.
Now, I know it's the last stage and I know it's only 6 hours. That isn't very long. But if we're talking about all these stages, if you have no clue of how long that stage could potentially take, you could be up in the high mountains and discover, look, this thing is going to take 40 hours instead of 20 hours. And suddenly it's a problem. So, they didn't have to give us the times and they didn't. And
well, you're right there. I mean, because you do the calculation on there, right? It's the distance, it's the elevation gain, and it's the time. I always found that time estimates are usually wildly inaccurate, right? There's this, there's 40 teams at Worlds. There's 100 teams, right? So it's a best guess. But to your point, you have appreciated seeing 9 kilometer trek, 5 hours. You're like, oh, that would have tipped you off.
Yes.
Because I think if that's me, a 9 kilometer, I'm like, well, I'm not bringing anything. We're done in no time.
Yeah. Exactly right. And so there are a fair number of teams who commented on this as well afterwards when you kind of get together and chat around the fire type logic. So again, I'm whinging because clearly Team 400 didn't need any of this information to finish 35 hours ahead of most of the field.
Right.
So, but like, that's my question then. Are we just soft nowadays that we're used to knowing what an average time is for a certain stage? Or is this fairly acceptable? I suppose it does depend on how dangerous those stages are. And I'm not saying that this race was dangerous. It wasn't. It's just...
Right. I think there's an interesting conversation to be held around the idea of, the term mission creep? You've heard that phrase before? Mission creep means like when you start doing something and you add a bit more to it, and all of a sudden your original mission is 9,000 times bigger, whatever it is, right? It's like Vietnam's a great example of that. The Vietnam War for America, mission creep. It just takes over.
Yeah.
And I sometimes wonder if it's with race directors, and by race directors, you know how much we love and respect the work that you do, right?
Yeah.
So just to think about, it's not a criticism at all, is that race directors begin to layer these things into their briefings and their work that they're doing, right? And if you roll back the clock in those earlier iterations of races, it was like, here's your map, here's the gear you're using. It's up to you to sort of interpret the map. It's up to you to sort of figure out how long the trek is going to be. Like, you sometimes wonder, do you accidentally disempower teams by giving them more information? I guess that's the question I'm thinking about.
Yeah. Agreed. It's at what point is enough? At what point are we being spoiled? And
also, at what point do you accidentally give the teams a greater sense of comfort around a high risk situation?
Yeah, that's also true. I think in this case, it's partly Antonio is a legendary eco-challenge racer.
Right.
And what he put on was fairly predictable from his background. Like, it's going to be hard. He's not going to mollycoddle us. You get in, you do the race, you get out.
You knew exactly, you spent 3 seconds on the internet reading about him. You knew exactly the kind of race you were getting.
Yeah. And for those who don't know, I mean, he was the first person to paddleboard across the Atlantic, the first person to paddleboard from the shoreline of California across to Hawaii. He was rowing, the first person to row a boat from Tierra del Fuego to the Antarctic. I mean, the guy's he's next level.
Yeah. By the way, he's up, just so you know, he's up on the Dark Zone whiteboard for guests that we want to have on. So if he hears us, so someone call him and tell him we want to get him on the show.
Yeah. He's next level. So, I mean, the race has absolutely got his signature on it. He did say at the banquet, I believe, I think that's what memory-wise, that they would like to make the Bimbache the 2028 World Championships.
Okay.
And I know 400 team, as the winners of this race, said this edition itself was worthy of a world championship, as in it was of that caliber. And it was only a 5-day race. It was as tough as, and it was hard as a normal world championship.
That's a common thing. And talking to people about the race, that's an accurate statement. People have talked about how this had the feel of a world championship race.
Yeah. And whew, that was interesting. Even that final canyon. I mean, what is great, what I do appreciate about the final canyon is you think you're just doing a 9K trek and you end up in a spectacular canyon, getting in and out of the water, getting cold, getting hot, getting cold. If you wore a wetsuit, you were okay. I didn't, because I'm a nut. I should have worn a wetsuit, but I didn't want it to get wet. Why? Because if my wetsuit got wet, I was literally moving out at 5 o'clock the next morning, and I didn't want a heavy wetsuit in my bags because I was running tight on how much weight I could carry. So I went through the cold, admittedly in the daytime, to keep my wetsuit dry. So I wouldn't have to dry.
Because it would be too heavy to pack to go home.
Correct.
Let the record show.
Yeah. I was cutting it fine with my weight limits. But, while I was doing it, I was like, wow, this is an amazing finish to a race. Aside from the finish line itself.
It's beautiful. I heard that was amazing. The falls was amazing. It was Uzad. Yeah, it was gorgeous.
Yeah, something like that. Uzad, I don't know. But I mean, it was such a busy race that we got to the finishing line, pretty much 10 minutes after the deadline, but it didn't matter because we were unranked. And I hardly saw those falls because we had to quickly have some tea, quickly start stripping off clothes to dry right there while we're having our tea. I mean, that was all over the place with all these tourists rushing around, hubbub and all that. And then, got to go pack our stuff because we've got to have our bike boxes ready before the banquet. And so I don't have a photograph of the falls, which is like, what? That's spectacular.
Yeah, and you published 268 photographs today on Facebook, and you missed the falls. So
I missed the fall.
Yeah. So let me ask you this question. So you talk about the idea that it was the worst race, one of the worst races you've ever had, but it was a grand adventure. It was a great adventure.
Oh yeah.
And some people who listen to the Dark Zone, they kind of don't understand that, right? They don't get that concept of how it could be worst and great simultaneously. Explain that.
From a racing perspective, for it to have been a great race, we would have made less errors. We would have been tighter on our decision making. We would have been more working as a precision machine and racing to the goal of being some sort of ranked position, I guess. And instead, right from stage one, we're unranked, which changes the flavor of the race.
Right.
It's not a bad thing. It's just that's life. And then decisions we made, and for example, approaching that icy saddle, that Cole, we elected to go wider than most teams. Most teams went down into a valley and up the other side. We decided to skirt around it and stay at height, right? Contour around. And we ended up doing this scramble up this scree slope, which was not a wise decision. But we had committed ourselves to the point where, well, there's no going down. So what do? Well, you ascend very unstable ground. Rocks are cascading. You're taking a step and waiting to see if it'll settle
or hold. It'll move.
And then you're going from solid piece to solid piece to keep yourself heading up. I'm hoping my teammates are not going to dislodge rocks that are going to run down. I'm telling them, listen, if a rock starts moving, just tell me, right? So I can try and get out the way. And that's not wise. It's not clever. But it was in the middle of it. I'm just going, we're calm, we're collected, we're not panicking or anything. But it's just, that's not racing intelligently.
Right,
that's not.
Right. You're kind of stumbling and bumbling around the course.
Yeah.
Right?
And that was, no other team did what we did in that particular thing I could see on the tracker. And so we had an experience that nobody else had in that particular section and in other sections. Mm-hmm. There were mistakes and issues and problems and unranked and whatever. So I raced way below my experience in terms of that's the racing side. In terms of the adventure side, I was in my comfort zone. Like, well,
it's fantastic. Have a good day at work or a bad day in Morocco. Right.
Yeah. I mean,
pick your poisons, right? Yeah.
Literally, I as a contractor, I turned down a week's worth of pay in order to go and do the race. So I paid the race fees and all those, and I turned down work.
And you paid on top of that, right? There's income you're not getting, right?
Yeah. But it was an expensive week for me, but obviously I don't regret it in any way, shape, or form. Incredible. The question is, would I do another race of Antonio's like the next one he does? And during it gets so mind-bending, some of those stages like the hiker bike, where I got to a point where I could see his eco-challenge mentality coming through, where you reach a point where you don't care anymore. You just push your bike and you don't care if you hit rocks. You don't care if it's whacking you on the shins. You don't care about the thorns. Stop caring. And I was quite amused by that. This is never going to end. I knew it was, of course, but this is never going to end. And I'm just always going to push my bike down a canyon that just goes on forever. It was really interesting.
I live here now. This is my new world.
Yeah, exactly. And I haven't had that before. It was really interesting. So at those points, you kind of go, will I do another Antonio race or will I only do it if he makes it softer? No, I wouldn't want him to make it softer.
Right.
But
I'm with you 1,000%. Right. If I have to choose, give me, from all accounts, give me 100 Moroccos. Right. Give me hard, give me tough, give me, yes, 1,000%. Because that's the reason why we get into the sport, right? Yes. We love the adventure of it,
Yes. And the only thing in my team we need to do is act on the knowledge we already know on how to sleep better, because that wasn't a good recipe.
Well, these are all lessons that you bring forward. So what now that you're a week after the race, and so what's next for you? What is AR's future for the rest of the year? What do you got going on?
Well, we were talking in the team last night, and none of us have a race on the horizon this year. The Itera is coming up in September. I didn't sign up for that because I could only do one of these races, and I chose Morocco over Itera. There's also the World Champs. I had wanted to do the World Champs originally, but I chose, again, Morocco over the World Champs because it's closer to home, was, more immediate, etc., and a little bit less expensive, I guess, because World Championships are always a big investment of time and energy and money.
What's it for you? You got to get across North America. Yeah. You have to get to Western Canada.
Yeah. That was the thing. So right now, I don't have any races for the remainder of this year. I am very curious about the World Championships next year, because I know, Raiden France is doing them, and I have been told what I think is the destination, and that sounds exciting. And so I'm like, woo!
Yeah. And I'm not going to say what it is. I'm not getting ahead of it, but I agree.
No.
I agree with you that if it is where they want to have it, it's going to be I'll say place to go race.
If anybody's interested, it's not if you're a fan of Asterix, that's all I'll say. If you're a fan of Asterix, Obelix.
We'll leave it. And on that note, Adam, we'll let the audience wonder what that means. And thanks for being on the Dark Zone. Thanks for giving us your recount. Glad you survived Morocco. Thanks again, as always, for all you do for adventure racing.
Cheers, man. Thanks so much. Thank you. Cheers.
Well, there you have it, folks. Adam Rose doing his thing, telling his story. Always a fun guest to have on the Dark Zone. And he is a gift to the sport, a true believer, as we like to say, in Dark Zone World Headquarters. If you like what you hear here on the Dark Zone, please head over to your platform of choice and like, click, and subscribe, recommend, pass along, repost, all that stuff. The algorithm likes it when we do that, and you will be helping out the Dark Zone. So thanks for being here. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to seeing you on the race course. Be safe out there.